I'm straight away welcoming Dr. Yogendra Yadav on the show this evening. Dr. Yadav, you've been trending all of yesterday and today for being the only one who got the exit polls right. Now, you had predicted that the BJP will not be in a position to cross the halfway mark on its own, and that is exactly what has happened. How did you get it right, and how did everyone else get it wrong? This wrong?
Shreya, I've always believed that exit polls or pollsters should not be the main news of election. That's actually a very limited role. These are postmen at best. So was I when I used to do it. To my mind, the direction where the election was going was absolutely clear if you went to the ground, if you spoke to ordinary people. And that's all I did. I had no poll with me. I had no sophisticated instruments with me. I was just speaking to ordinary people and drawing inferences. The polls went wrong to my mind because there are four kind of errors that creep into polls. Usually polls, even the best of forecasts, benefit from errors cancelling each other out. But in this instance, all those errors were stacked one upon another. If you look at what I had been saying, which looks like a good forecast in retrospect, even there you would find many errors. I had underestimated BJP's losses in Uttar Pradesh, but overestimated that in Bihar. So errors cancelled each other out. In the case of exit polls put out by all the channels, all the errors were in one direction. There was, first of all, sampling error. They undersampled the poor and voters who were likely to have shifted away from BJP. That's not a deliberate thing. It is built into the manner in which exit polls are done outside the polling booths, where you tend to speak to more articulate people. Number two, there was a reporting error. People who were switching away from BJP, let us say to SP in Uttar Pradesh, were less likely to tell you, at least not in the first 15 seconds. A longish conversation brought you to that point. Normally it wouldn't. Third, there was an aggregation error. Aggregating those survey reports into vote shares, they were being slightly adjusted in favor of the BJP, not because of a deliberate political bias necessarily, but I think everyone was slightly cautious. And finally, there was a conversion error of votes into seats. So these are errors which can happen. What I found strange and what needs to be thought about is, why is it that all the errors were in one direction? Is it that pollsters were under some kind of pressure that if I make this kind of error, it's all right, but in case I make an error which shows BJP to be lower than where it might end, that's a disaster. I don't want that error at all. Is that what was driving the channels? Number two, why is it that in some cases you almost felt that the final seat tally was deliberately lifted up to cross 400, 401? As a pollster, I find it somewhat odd, as if someone was trying to say, "Bhai, mujhe to 400 par karwana hai." And third that I found odd was all the channels were reporting almost the same figures, something between 350 and 400. You normally don't see that kind of a consensus across polls, especially if the consensus turns out to be wrong. That's terrible, very strange kind of thing to happen, especially because when I reviewed some of the polls that were being done on a scientific academic basis, all those other polls which were not on television were actually suggesting a very different picture. All this therefore builds up to something is amiss, something is odd, something that needs to be interrogated. To my mind, we should not turn into a personal witch hunt of the kind that has happened in the last 24 hours or so. That's unnecessary, unseemly, and unhelpful. What we should do is to focus on the methodology and transparency and reporting of conflict of interest. So my suggestions would be three. Number one, every channel or every newspaper, before you broadcast any poll, and this request is to the editors, not to pollsters, can you please insist that you want to see what is the methodology of the poll that you are publishing? Can you ask them to be transparent in reporting their methodology? Are you conducting interviews on telephone? If on telephone, are you not missing out the lower segment of society? What is the composition of the voters you have interviewed? How many men, how many women, urban, rural, caste, class, everything needs to be known. So can we insist on transparent reporting of all the polls? I find only the CSDS doing it right now. Access My India also did a bit of that, that must be said. No one else bothers to even report such things. And finally, may I suggest that there should be some disclosures which should be mandatory. Like when I speak to you, you would clearly say, he is not a pollster, he has political affiliations, he's from Bharat Jodo Abhiyan, which has worked against the BJP. That's a minimum disclosure that must be made before anyone listens to what I'm saying. Would it not be useful for channels to report that Mr. X is doing exit poll for us? His company is mainly involved as an in-house pollster for the Bharatiya Janata Party. This other agency is involved with the Congress party. Why should it not be reported? You do these things and you would see the quality of polling will improve in this country.
Sir, then the other big question. The story of this election in many ways is the story and how it unfolded in Uttar Pradesh. How did no one catch the hawa of what was happening? What did the Samajwadi Party do right and the BJP wrong?
Shreya, two things. May I say that after the first round of polling, when I was traveling in Uttar Pradesh, I not only saw, I also posted to say, Uttar Pradesh mein rajnaitik bhujal aane wala hai. No one took me seriously because they thought it's a political activist who's trying to give some goli. Now, two things are happening. If you are looking at a state where one party has 45% votes, the other party, let us say, has 50% vote. And if I'm traveling as a reporter, it's very hard to tell who has 45 and who has 50. If one has 30 and the other one has 60, then you can very easily pick that. But if it's that close, I thought most of the reporters were simply focusing on levels to see who is ahead, which is very difficult for any ground reporter to tell. What they should have instead focused on was change. When my team and I were traveling, we would simply keep discarding every report of someone who said, I was voting for this party, I'm again going to vote for this party. And we would simply focus on change, which is the direction of change. And Shreya, when we did that, it was absolutely clear, and I reported it again and again and again, and I challenged everyone to please step out of their house and check it out, that no Samajwadi Party or Congress voter of the past was saying that we would not vote for them this time. Everyone was saying, of course we'll vote for them again. BSP voter, there was a small attrition, slightly to the BJP, but more to Samajwadi Party. And among the BJP voters, there was a clear attrition of anything between 1/6, 1/8, or sometimes 1/4. So I'm surprised how people miss this direction of change. I don't expect ground reporters to be able to estimate the quantum of change, because for that you need barometers. That's why you need surveys. But the direction was so clear that I'm actually surprised what's happening to the quality of reporting. I must say, Shreya, having said all this, during this election, many people did ground reporting, and I'm happy to report that many women journalists were actually keeping the country informed about what was happening, traveling to ground and bringing out reports. If you read those reports carefully, you had a sense of what was happening. So I'm surprised that they missed it out. In terms of what the Samajwadi Party did right, let's not overestimate. You know, the problem in our country is that if they had lost, we would have thought everything they did was wrong. And now that they have done well, we would imagine that everything they did was right. No, something else was happening. I would give more than political parties, it were the people who were doing something very important. I think for some reason, which is not entirely clear to me, people thought, all right, it's time we stopped postponing the questions we have been postponing for many years now. Why they thought of it now and not in 2022 is not entirely clear to me. But for some reason, they just said, okay, it's time we asked about inflation, unemployment, Avara Pashu, all these issues were there in 2022 as well. But at that
Correct.
time, their memory of what Samajwadi Party government was like, and the memory part of which was manufactured, was too strong for them to be able to go back to those things. This time, they went back to ordinary everyday concerns, and also they were sick and tired of the BJP leaders, local MLAs, incumbent member of parliament. There was enormous anger against them, which I'm sure everyone would have noticed. All that came together, and specifically 2-3 things happened to consolidate it. Muslims thought this was an election to decide whether they would have equal citizenship in this country or not. So there was entire consolidation of Muslim vote behind the party that could defeat the BJP. Very little went to the BSP. Dalits thought it's constitution. And if constitution goes, reservation goes, and there goes our livelihood. And for some parts for the farmers, it was an attempt to teach them a lesson. All this came together to produce this rather dramatic victory in Uttar Pradesh.
Something that no one saw coming except perhaps you and a handful of ground reporters. We leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much, Mr. Yogendra Yadav, for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you here on Mirror.